My niece tried to get power of attorney while I was on vacation. The certified letter was waiting for me when I got back from Venice, sitting innocuously between a stack of grocery store circulars and utility bills. My hands were still stained with gelato and exhaustion from the 14-hour flight, but something about the legal office return address made my stomach clench. I'd been home exactly 47 minutes. Congratulations on your successful petition for emergency guardianship and power of attorney, the letter began. Per your request regarding the mental incapacitation and disappearance of Eleanor Margaret Hartwell. I read it 3 times before it sank in. Someone had tried to have me declared mentally incompetent. Someone had told lawyers I was missing. Someone had initiated legal proceedings to take control of my life, my house, my savings account that held $347,000 from 43 years of teaching high school English. That someone was my niece Sarah. I sank into my kitchen chair, still wearing the wrinkled travel clothes I'd thrown on in Rome 12 hours earlier. The house smelled like the vanilla candles Sarah had been burning. She'd always complained that my place smelled too much like old books. Now I knew why she'd been so eager to house sit for 2 weeks. It wasn't out of love for her dear Aunt Ellie. It was a reconnaissance mission. My phone buzzed with a text from her. Welcome home. Hope you had an amazing trip. Left some groceries in your fridge. Can't wait to hear all about Italy. 2 hearts. The audacity was breathtaking. 3 heart emojis from someone who'd spent my vacation trying to steal my life. I called the law office immediately. A paralegal named Jennifer explained in apologetic tones that they'd withdrawn the petition once they realized I wasn't actually missing, just traveling, and certainly wasn't mentally incapacitated. Apparently, Sarah had been very convincing. She'd told them I'd been acting erratically 4 months, that I'd wandered off and the family was desperately worried. She'd even provided them with a list of concerning behaviors, forgetting appointments, leaving doors unlocked, confusion about dates. All lies. She seemed genuinely distressed about your well-being, Jennifer said carefully. She had documentation of your mortgage being paid off, your retirement accounts, everything. She claimed she was the only family member in a position to help manage your affairs. Documentation. Sarah had gone through my files, my personal papers, probably my bedroom drawers. She'd made copies of my financial statements. She'd calculated exactly what she stood to gain. The worst part? I'd been planning to give her money. $20,000 to help with her credit card debt and her daughter's college fund. I'd even drafted the check before leaving for Europe, intending to surprise her when I got back. It was sitting in my desk drawer right now, made out to Sarah Elizabeth Crawford in my careful teacher's handwriting. She could have just asked. I would have said yes. Sarah had always been the responsible one among my brother's 3 children. While her siblings bounced between jobs and relationships, she'd become a nurse, bought a small house, raised her daughter Emma as a single mother. I'd watched her struggle and admire her strength. She was the one I'd planned to leave everything to in my will. Instead, she tried to have me declared incompetent so she could take it all while I was still breathing. I poured myself a glass of the Chianti I'd brought back from Tuscany and spread the legal documents across my kitchen table. Outside, October dusk was settling over my neighborhood in Salem, Oregon. Thanksgiving was 6 weeks away. The whole family would be here, just like every year. This time would be different, though. This time, I'd be ready for Sarah. The next morning, I called my bank at exactly 9 a.m. Patricia, who'd handled my accounts for 16 years, sounded genuinely concerned when I explained what had happened. Oh, Eleanor, I'm so sorry. Yes, we did receive some calls while you were away. A young woman claiming to be your niece, asking about your accounts and whether you'd been making any unusual transactions. She said the family was worried about your mental state. My grip tightened on the phone. What did you tell her? Nothing, of course. We can't discuss account details without proper authorization. But she was very persistent. Called 3 times over 2 weeks. The last time, she mentioned something about having power of attorney paperwork in process and asked if we could flag your accounts for unusual activity. Sarah had been thorough. While I was wandering through the Uffizi Gallery and riding gondolas in Venice, she'd been systematically laying the groundwork to convince everyone that I was losing my mind. The bank calls weren't random desperation, they were part of a calculated plan to create a paper trail of concerned family member inquiries. I spent the rest of the morning on the phone. My doctor's office confirmed that someone had called asking about my mental health, claiming to be worried about dementia symptoms. Sarah had even contacted my neighbor Mrs. Chen, spinning some story about my family being concerned about me living alone. Mrs. Chen, bless her, had apparently told Sarah that I seemed sharp as a tack and to mind her own business. But it was my call to Emma, Sarah's 16-year-old daughter, that really broke my heart. Aunt Ellie. Mom said you were back from Italy. Did you bring me anything? Emma's voice was bright with genuine excitement. She'd always been a sweet kid, honor roll student, played violin in the school orchestra, volunteered at the animal shelter on weekends. Of course I did, sweetheart. Listen, can I ask you something? Did your mother seem worried about me before I left? Did she mention anything about me being forgetful or confused? There was a pause. Well, she did say she was concerned about you traveling alone at your age. And she mentioned that you'd been calling her more often lately, asking the same questions sometimes. She said it might be early Alzheimer's or something, and that's why she wanted to stay at your house while you were gone, to kind of check things out, you know? My blood turned to ice water. Sarah had been preparing Emma too, priming her own daughter to potentially testify about my supposed cognitive decline. How long had she been planning this? Did I seem confused to you when we had lunch last month? I asked carefully. No, you seemed totally normal. You remembered everything about my school play and asked about my college applications. You even helped me with my English essay, remember? The one about symbolism in The Great Gatsby? Emma hesitated. Aunt Ellie, is everything okay? You sound weird. After I hung up, I sat in my living room staring at the framed photos on my mantelpiece. There was Sarah at Emma's 8th grade graduation, beaming with pride. Sarah and Emma at last year's Thanksgiving, helping me mash potatoes in my kitchen. Sarah's nursing school graduation 12 years ago, where I cried with joy watching her walk across that stage. When had gratitude curdled into greed? When had affection become opportunity? I opened my laptop and started a new document. Evidence collection, Sarah Crawford fraud attempt. Then I began typing everything I could remember, every phone call, every detail from the legal documents, every date and time. If Sarah wanted to play games with documentation, I'd show her how a retired English teacher conducted research. By Thursday, I'd uncovered the real scope of Sarah's operation. What started as phone calls to verify her story had turned into a full excavation of her deception, and each layer was more calculated than the last. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source, my mailman, Dennis, who'd been delivering to my route for 8 years. He knocked on my door around noon, looking uncomfortable. "Mrs. Hartwell, I probably should have mentioned this earlier, but your niece asked me to redirect some of your mail while you were traveling. Said it was for security reasons, what with the house being empty." My stomach dropped. "Which mail?" "Bank statements, mostly. Anything that looked official or financial. She said she was handling your affairs temporarily and gave me an address on Maple Street." Dennis shifted his weight. "I told her I couldn't do that without a proper mail forwarding request from you, but she was pretty insistent. Even showed me some legal-looking papers." Maple Street. That was across town, nowhere near Sarah's house on Pine Ridge. She'd rented a separate address specifically for intercepting my mail. This wasn't desperation, it was a sophisticated fraud operation. I called the Maple Street address that evening, pretending to be a delivery service. A bored-sounding woman confirmed it was a mailbox rental facility. "Yeah, we got someone renting box 247 under the name S. Crawford. Paid for 3 months in advance, cash." 3 months. Sarah had been planning this since August, maybe longer. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about our conversation in July when she'd called me crying about her credit card debt. She owed $23,000 across 4 cards, plus Emma's college fund was nearly empty after her ex-husband stopped paying child support. I'd listened for an hour, made sympathetic noises, offered to help however I could. "You're the only one in this family who has their life together, Aunt Ellie," she'd sobbed. "Everyone else is barely scraping by. Sometimes I feel so alone trying to do everything right." I'd felt sorry for her. Proud of her for being responsible enough to confide in me instead of making bad financial decisions. That conversation had cemented my decision to include her in my will and to give her the $20,000. Now I realized she hadn't been confiding, she'd been fishing. Testing how much I knew about the family's financial situation, how willing I was to help, how much money I actually had access to. Friday morning brought another revelation. My friend Margaret called, excited to tell me about her own upcoming trip to Scotland. "I got the name of that travel agent you used from your niece Sarah. She called me last week asking about your Italy trip, said she was planning a surprise welcome home party and wanted details about your itinerary." "Sarah called you?" "Oh yes, lovely girl. She was so thoughtful, asking all sorts of questions about your travel arrangements, what hotels you'd stayed at, how you'd seemed before you left. She mentioned being worried about your memory lately, asked if I'd noticed anything concerning." Margaret paused. "I told her you seemed fine to me, but she said these things can be subtle early on." Sarah had contacted my friends too, casting a wider net to establish her narrative about my supposed decline. She'd been building a case, collecting potential witnesses, creating a timeline of concerning behavior that existed only in her imagination. I hung up and immediately called my attorney, Howard Brennan, who'd handled my will and estate planning for 15 years. "Eleanor, thank God you're calling. I've been trying to reach you since Monday. We received some very disturbing documents claiming you'd been declared mentally incompetent, requesting copies of your will and estate documents." "From Sarah Crawford?" "Actually, no. From a law firm representing someone named Sarah Crawford, but they wouldn't specify the relationship. Professional-looking letterhead, proper legal language. If I hadn't known you were simply traveling, I might have taken it seriously." The room started spinning. Sarah hadn't just tried to get power of attorney, she'd gone after my will too. Howard's voice continued through my shock. "They claim to have legal authority to access your estate documents due to a guardianship proceeding. Wanted copies of everything, the will, trust documents, beneficiary information, property deeds. I told them I'd need to verify directly with you or see court-stamped paperwork." "What firm was it?" "Henderson, Walsh and Associates. Downtown Portland. Big firm, they handle complex estate litigation. This wasn't some strip mall operation, Eleanor. Whoever hired them paid serious money." After hanging up, I stared at my kitchen ceiling for a full 10 minutes. Sarah was a nurse at Salem General making $58,000 a year. How was she affording a high-end Portland law firm? The retainer alone would have cost more than she claimed to have in savings. The answer came Tuesday morning when I finally worked up the courage to drive past her house on Pine Ridge. A bright yellow sold sticker was plastered across the real estate sign in her front yard. Sarah had sold her house. The house she'd bought 7 years ago, the one she'd been so proud of, the first place she'd ever owned. She'd liquidated her only real asset to fund this scheme. I parked across the street and called the listing agent whose name was on the sign. Pretending to be interested in the neighborhood, I asked casual questions about the sale. "Oh, that property closed fast. Cash buyer, closed in 3 weeks. Seller was motivated, needed money immediately for some kind of family emergency." The agent paused. "Actually, it was kind of sad. Single mother, teenage daughter. They're moving into a rental apartment across town until they get back on their feet," as she put it. The rental apartment. I was willing to bet it was near the Maple Street mailbox facility. That evening, I did something I'd never done in my 67 years. I drove to Sarah's new address and sat in my car like a private investigator. The complex was called Riverside Gardens, though I couldn't see any gardens and the only water was a drainage ditch behind the parking lot. At 7:43 p.m., Sarah emerged from Unit 12 carrying a large manila envelope. She walked to her Honda Civic, the same car I'd given her money to repair last Christmas, and drove directly to a FedEx office on Lancaster Drive. I followed her. Through the window, I watched her ship the envelope via overnight delivery, paying with cash. When she left, I waited 5 minutes then went inside. "Excuse me," I told the clerk, "I think the woman who was just in here might have used my address by mistake. Could you check what address that envelope was going to?" The young man shook his head. "Sorry, I can't give out customer information. But if it was shipped to the wrong address, they can call customer service tomorrow." I drove home feeling like I was losing my mind. Here I was, following my own niece around Salem like some paranoid conspiracy theorist. But the evidence kept mounting: the sold house, the Portland lawyers, the overnight packages, the systematic campaign to convince everyone I was mentally declining. Wednesday brought the phone call I'd been dreading. Eleanor? This is your brother Michael. My youngest brother's voice was strained, formal. We usually called each other Mike and Ellie. I think we need to talk. Sarah came to see Linda and me last night, and she's very concerned about you. My heart hammered. Michael lived in Bend, 3 hours away. For Sarah to drive there on a weeknight meant this was escalating. She says you've been acting confused lately, forgetting conversations, repeating yourself. She's worried you might be developing dementia and that your trip to Italy was, well, possibly not the best decision for someone in your condition. Michael, I'm fine. She also mentioned you've been making some unusual financial decisions. Large withdrawals, talking about changing your will. Ellie, if you're struggling with memory issues, there's no shame in getting help. The line went quiet. My baby brother, who I'd helped raise after our parents died, who I'd lent money to start his construction business, who brought his kids to my house every Thanksgiving, he was buying Sarah's lies. Michael, listen to me very carefully, I said, gripping the phone so hard my knuckles went white. What exactly did Sarah tell you about my finances? She said you've been withdrawing large amounts of cash, talking about giving money away to strangers you met in Italy. She's worried someone might be taking advantage of you. His voice softened slightly. Ellie, she showed U.S. bank statements. Withdrawals of $800 here, $1,200 there. It looks erratic. My breath caught. Those weren't erratic withdrawals, they were my vacation expenses. The $800 was for the cooking class in Tuscany I booked as a splurge. The $1,200 was for the upgraded hotel room in Rome when my original booking got cancelled. Normal travel expenses that Sarah was twisting into evidence of mental decline. She showed you my bank statements? She said you gave her access to help manage things while you were away. Eleanor, she's genuinely worried. We all are. Who's we all, Michael? Another pause. Well, Linda and I. And she said she talked to Rebecca too. Rebecca. My sister in Phoenix, the family gossip who could spread news faster than wildfire. If Sarah had gotten to Rebecca, half the family probably already thought I was losing my mind. Did Sarah mention anything about legal proceedings? About trying to get power of attorney? She said the family might need to consider guardianship options if your condition worsens. That it's better to have plans in place before there's a crisis. Michael's voice grew more concerned. Ellie, you're starting to sound paranoid. Maybe you should see Dr. Martinez, just for a checkup? After I hung up, I realized the true genius of Sarah's strategy. She wasn't just trying to steal my money, she was systematically isolating me from my support system. Every conversation I had defending myself would sound increasingly desperate, potentially unhinged. The more I protested that I was fine, the more convinced everyone would become that I wasn't. I called Rebecca immediately, catching her during her evening wine ritual in Scottsdale. Oh, Ellie. I was just thinking about you. Sarah called earlier this week. She's so sweet to be looking out for you like that. Rebecca's voice had that careful tone people use when they think you're fragile. She mentioned you seemed a little scattered before your trip. Forgetting names, mixing up dates. Rebecca, I need you to listen. And honestly, traveling to Europe alone at our age? I can barely handle a weekend in Las Vegas anymore. Maybe it's time to consider a nice assisted living community. There's a lovely one here in Scottsdale with a book club and everything. Assisted living. Sarah had planted that seed too. I spent Thursday morning calling every family member I could think of. The pattern was always the same. Sarah had contacted them first, expressing concern about my declining mental state, sharing carefully selected evidence of my confusion, positioning herself as the devoted niece trying to protect me. My nephew David in Seattle had been told I'd called him repeatedly asking the same questions about his job, though I'd spoken to him exactly once in the past 6 months. My cousin Janet in Sacramento heard that I'd gotten lost driving to the grocery store, something that had never happened. Sarah had created an entire alternate reality where I was a confused elderly woman in desperate need of supervision. The most damaging call came from Emma's school counselor, who reached out Thursday afternoon with genuine concern. Mrs. Hartwell, I wanted to follow up on our conversation about Emma's college applications. When we spoke last week, you seemed a bit confused about the timeline and kept asking me to repeat information. I never called you last week. I was in Italy until Sunday. Long pause. Oh. Oh my. Someone called claiming to be you, asking detailed questions about Emma's grades and college prospects. They knew specific details about her GPA, her extracurricular activities, even mentioned the violin lessons you pay for. Sarah had impersonated me. She'd called Emma's school pretending to be me, deliberately acting confused to create another witness to my supposed cognitive decline. What number did they call from? Let me check. It was 503-555-0847. I wrote it down with shaking hands. That wasn't my number or Sarah's. She'd gotten a separate phone line specifically for impersonating me. Friday evening, I sat in my kitchen staring at 17 pages of notes I'd compiled over the past week. Sarah's fraud wasn't just elaborate, it was methodical, well-funded, and terrifyingly effective. She'd created false evidence, bribed or manipulated witnesses, hired expensive lawyers, and systematically turned my own family against me. The $20,000 check I'd planned to give her was still in my desk drawer, now a bitter reminder of how completely I'd misjudged her character. My phone rang at 8:30 p.m. Just tired. Well, I was thinking maybe I should come stay with you for a few days, just to help you get settled back in. I could cook some meals, help organize your mail, maybe drive you to some appointments. Move back into my house. Resume her surveillance and continue building her case that I couldn't manage alone. That's very thoughtful, but I'm managing just fine. Of course you are. I just thought, well, traveling can be so exhausting at our age. Our age. I was 67. She was 32. I'll talk to you soon, Sarah. Aunt Ellie? I love you. You know that, right? Everything I'm doing is because I care about you. After hanging up, I poured myself another glass of Chianti and made a decision that would have seemed impossible 3 weeks ago. It was time to destroy my niece. The next morning, I called Howard Brennan back and asked him to recommend a private investigator. Within 3 hours, I was sitting across from Janet Rodriguez in her compact office above a coffee shop on State Street, explaining why I needed to investigate my own niece. This is more common than you'd think, Janet said, reviewing my 17 pages of notes. Elder financial abuse often involves family members, and they're usually the hardest cases to prosecute because the emotional manipulation is so sophisticated. She looked up at me with sharp brown eyes. The phone number you mentioned, 503-555-0847, I can trace that in about 10 minutes. While she worked on her computer, I fidgeted with my purse strap and wondered if I was making a terrible mistake. Was I really hiring someone to spy on Emma's mother? But then I remembered Sarah's voice last night. Everything I'm doing is because I care about you. The lie had rolled off her tongue so smoothly. Got it, Janet said. Prepaid phone purchased at a Walmart in Tigard on September 15th. Paid cash, but they have security footage. The address she gave for the account is fake. It's a parking lot behind a Denny's. September 15th. 2 days before I left for Italy. There's something else, Janet continued, typing rapidly. That law firm she hired, Henderson, Walsh & Associates? I have contacts there. Their retainer for guardianship cases starts at $25,000. My mouth went dry. She paid $25,000 just to start the process? Minimum. For the level of work they did, multiple legal filings, research, documentation, she probably paid closer to $40,000. Janet leaned back in her chair. Mrs. Hartwell, your niece sold a house that Zillow estimates was worth $340,000. After paying off her mortgage and realtor fees, she probably walked away with about $80,000. She's betting that $80,000 on getting control of your estate. The room felt suddenly cold. Sarah hadn't just seen an opportunity, she'd calculated the odds and decided I was worth the investment. I want to hire you, I said. I want documentation of everything she's done, everyone she's contacted, every lie she's told. Janet quoted me a rate of $125 per hour plus expenses. I wrote her a check for $2,500 on the spot. Monday morning brought a call from Dr. Martinez's office that made my blood pressure spike into dangerous territory. Mrs. Hartwell, we've had several calls from your family members expressing concern about your mental health. Your niece Sarah has been particularly persistent, requesting that we schedule you for a cognitive assessment. What kind of calls? She's called 4 times in the past 2 weeks, stating that you've been exhibiting signs of dementia, confusion, repetitive questions, getting lost, difficulty managing finances. She mentioned that you recently traveled alone to Europe despite being clearly unfit for such a trip. I closed my eyes. Sarah was building a medical paper trail now too. She also asked if we could discuss your mental state with her, claiming she has your permission to access your medical information. We told her we'd need written authorization from you, of course. Don't give her anything. And I want a note in my file that Sarah Crawford is not authorized to receive any information about my care. Of course. But Mrs. Hartwell, given the family's concerns, would you be interested in scheduling a routine cognitive screening? Just to put everyone's minds at ease? That afternoon, Janet called with an update that made me physically nauseous. I've been tracking Sarah's activities since you hired me. Yesterday, she visited 3 more law firms in Portland. She's shopping around, probably looking for someone willing to file a new guardianship petition. Janet's voice was grim. She's also been to the courthouse twice, researching the process for having someone declared mentally incompetent. Can she do that? File again with a different lawyer? Absolutely. The first petition was withdrawn, not denied. She can claim she has new evidence of your deteriorating condition, especially if she gets statements from family members or medical professionals. I sank into my kitchen chair. How long do I have? Hard to say. If she moves fast and gets enough people to sign affidavits about your supposed mental decline, she could have a hearing scheduled within 30 days. Oregon courts take elder abuse seriously, but they also act quickly when someone appears to be in immediate danger. That evening, my phone rang 6 times. Michael called twice, Rebecca called once, and Sarah called 3 times. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table and did something I never thought I'd have to do. I planned my own defense against my family. I opened my laptop and began documenting everything, every conversation, every lie Sarah had told, every person she'd manipulated. If she wanted a war of documentation, I'd give her one. But first, I had a more immediate problem. Thanksgiving was now 4 weeks away, and my entire family was expecting to gather in my house, just like every year. They'd all be here, Michael and Linda, Rebecca and her husband Tom, David and his wife, 3 of my other nieces and nephews, Emma, and of course Sarah. Except this year, I wouldn't be playing the role of gracious hostess serving turkey and pumpkin pie. This year, I'd be serving justice. Tuesday morning, Janet called with news that made my hands shake so badly I nearly dropped the phone. Mrs. Hartwell, I need you to sit down. I've been monitoring Sarah's activities, and she's escalated significantly. Janet's usually calm voice carried an edge of urgency. Yesterday at 3:47 p.m., she filed a new petition for emergency guardianship with a different law firm, Castellano and Associates on Morrison Street. This time, she's claiming you're in immediate danger. The kitchen suddenly felt airless. What kind of danger? According to the filing, you've been acting increasingly erratic and paranoid, making wild accusations about family members, and showing signs of severe cognitive decline with potential for self-harm through neglect. Janet paused. She's requesting an emergency hearing within 10 days. 10 days. Not 30. 10. There's more. She submitted sworn affidavits from 3 family members, your brother Michael, your sister Rebecca, and someone named David Morrison. That's my nephew David. My voice sounded hollow even to myself. What did the affidavits say? They all follow the same pattern. Claims that you've called them repeatedly with confused, rambling conversations. That you've accused Sarah of trying to steal from you without any basis in reality. That your trip to Italy was evidence of poor judgment and possible exploitation by strangers. Janet's tone grew more serious. Mrs. Hartwell, these aren't just character witnesses anymore. They're stating under penalty of perjury that you're mentally incompetent. I stared out my kitchen window at the oak tree I planted 30 years ago, watching its leaves flutter in the October wind. My own family had signed legal documents declaring me insane. How did she get them to do that? From what I can piece together, she's been working on them for weeks. Small conversations, gradual escalation of concern, carefully curated evidence of your decline. She probably presented the affidavits as a way to protect you, to get you the help you need. The cruelest part was that I could picture it perfectly. Sarah sitting in Michael's living room, tearfully explaining how worried she was about dear Aunt Ellie. Showing them selected bank statements, sharing concerning phone conversations that never happened, painting herself as the only family member brave enough to take action. Janet, I need you to do something for me. Contact Dr. Martinez's office and schedule that cognitive assessment for this afternoon. Full neurological workup, whatever they recommend. Are you sure? That could backfire if... I'm sure. If Sarah wants to claim I'm mentally incompetent, I want independent medical proof that I'm not. I grabbed a pen and started writing notes. Also, I need you to get copies of those affidavits. I want to know exactly what lies they're swearing to. After hanging up, I called my bank and scheduled an appointment with Patricia for Thursday morning. Then I called Howard Brennan and asked him to prepare counter-documentation for the guardianship hearing. Finally, I did something that broke my heart. I called Emma's school and asked them to flag her records. I need to ensure that only her mother can pick her up or make decisions about her education, I told the secretary. There may be some family legal proceedings that could affect her. Oh, Mrs. Hartwell, I'm so sorry to hear that. Emma speaks about you so fondly. That afternoon, Dr. Martinez put me through 3 hours of the most comprehensive mental health evaluation I'd ever experienced. Memory tests, cognitive assessments, neurological exams, even a brain scan to rule out any signs of dementia or stroke damage. Your cognitive function is excellent, Eleanor, Dr. Martinez said, reviewing the results. Better than average for your age group, actually. Whatever your family's concerns, they're not based in medical reality. I need that in writing. Official documentation on your letterhead, with today's date. Of course. May I ask what this is about? I explained the situation in clinical terms, watching his expression grow increasingly troubled. This is elder abuse, he said finally. Financial and emotional manipulation designed to isolate you from your support system. I've seen it before, unfortunately. He made notes in my chart. I'm documenting this conversation and my assessment. If anyone calls asking about your mental competency, they'll get a very clear answer. Wednesday evening, Janet arrived at my house with a manila folder thick with documentation. She spread photocopies across my dining room table like evidence in a murder trial. Here are the affidavits, she said, pointing to 3 notarized documents. Michael swears you called him at least 15 times in September, repeatedly asking the same questions about his business and accusing Sarah of plotting against you. Rebecca states that you told her you were being followed and that people were trying to steal your house. I read David's affidavit with growing horror. According to my nephew, I'd called him crying at 2 a.m. on September 23rd, claiming that Sarah was working with lawyers to have me committed and begging him to hide my money before they take everything. I never made any of these calls, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I know. I checked your phone records. You made 4 calls total in September, none to these family members. Janet pulled out another document. But here's the interesting part. Remember that prepaid phone Sarah bought? The call logs show multiple calls to all 3 of these numbers, always lasting 20 to 30 minutes, always late at night. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Sarah hadn't just impersonated me with Emma's school counselor. She'd been calling my family members for weeks, pretending to be me, deliberately acting confused and paranoid to create evidence for exactly these affidavits. She called them pretending to be me, I said. That's my theory. And it's identity fraud, wire fraud, and perjury all rolled into one. Janet's expression was grim. The problem is proving it. These family members genuinely believe they were talking to you. They signed those affidavits in good faith. I looked at the hearing notice again. October 29th, 9 a.m., courtroom 4B. Exactly 3 days before my nephew's birthday party, and 5 days before my planned Thanksgiving confrontation. Sarah had accelerated her timeline. She was trying to get legal control of my life before I could expose her to the family. But she'd made one crucial mistake. She'd underestimated her old English teacher aunt, and now I had proof of her crimes. The war was about to begin. Thursday morning, I sat across from Patricia at the bank, watching her face grow increasingly pale as she reviewed my account activity with fresh eyes. Mrs. Hartwell, I need to show you something concerning, she said, turning her computer monitor toward me. These withdrawal patterns you mentioned, they're not random. Someone has been systematically accessing information about your accounts. My stomach clenched. What do you mean? We keep detailed logs of all inquiries, even unsuccessful ones. Starting in August, someone has been calling every few days asking about your balance, recent transactions, pending transfers. Always claiming to be you, but using slightly different identifying information each time. She scrolled through a list that made my head spin. August 12th, August 19th, August 26th, the calls went back further than I'd realized. Here's what's interesting, Patricia continued. The caller always got your account numbers right, and your social security number, but kept getting your mother's maiden name wrong. Used Henderson instead of Harrison. Our security protocols flagged it every time, so we never released any information. Henderson. Like Henderson, Walsh and Associates, the first law firm Sarah had contacted. But Mrs. Hartwell, someone with legitimate access to your accounts, did review all of this information in late August. The system shows a successful login to online banking on August 28th at 11:47 p.m. from your registered computer. August 28th. I'd been at Emma's school orientation that night, helping her register for AP classes. Sarah had borrowed my house key to water my plants while I was out. Can you print all of this? I asked. Every log entry, every failed attempt, every successful login? Absolutely. And Mrs. Hartwell? I'm recommending we implement additional security measures on your accounts immediately. Verbal passwords, dual authorization for any changes, the works. 20 minutes later, I walked out of the bank with 14 pages of evidence that Sarah had been planning this fraud for nearly 3 months. My phone buzzed with a text message. Aunt Ellie, I know you're upset about something. Can we please talk? I'm worried about you. Sarah Redhart. I stared at that heart emoji for a full minute. Even now, with a court hearing scheduled for Monday, she was still playing the concerned niece card. I texted back, "I'm fine. See you at Thanksgiving." Her response came within seconds. "Actually, about Thanksgiving, maybe we should keep it small this year? Just immediate family? I'm concerned about you handling a big gathering." She was trying to control Thanksgiving too. Limit the audience for whatever final act she had planned. "My house, my rules," I replied. "Everyone's invited, just like always." Friday afternoon, Janet called with news that made my blood pressure spike again. Sarah's lawyer filed additional emergency motions yesterday. They're claiming you've been making threats against Sarah and that she's genuinely fearful for her safety. Janet's voice was tight with anger. They want a temporary restraining order preventing you from contacting her or Emma until after the guardianship hearing. Threats? What threats? According to the filing, you called her Tuesday night screaming about making her pay and destroying her life. Said you were going to ruin her at Thanksgiving and that she'd be sorry she ever crossed you. I felt the blood drain from my face. I never called her Tuesday night. I was at Dr. Martinez's office until 6 p.m., then home alone all evening. I know. I was parked outside your house conducting surveillance from 5:30 to 11 p.m. You never left, and no one visited. But Mrs. Hartwell, she has a recording. The world tilted sideways. A recording of what? A voicemail, allegedly from you, left on her phone at 9:23 p.m. Tuesday. It's rambling, angry, definitely sounds like an elderly woman having some kind of breakdown. Janet paused. The voice analysis is inconclusive. It could be you, or it could be someone doing a very good impression. Sarah had found someone to impersonate me again. But this time, instead of just confusing my family, she was creating evidence that I was dangerous. Janet, I need you to contact the phone company. Get records showing that no calls were made from my landline or cell phone Tuesday night. Already on it. But Sarah's smart. If she used a voice over internet protocol system or spoofed your number, the phone records might show a call that looks like it came from your line. That evening, I sat in my kitchen holding the restraining order petition, feeling more alone than I'd ever felt in my 67 years. Sarah wasn't just trying to steal my money anymore. She was systematically destroying my reputation, turning me into a crazy old woman who threatened people and couldn't be trusted around her own family. The court date was Monday. 4 days to prove that everything, the confused phone calls, the paranoid rambling, the angry threats, was an elaborate fraud perpetrated by the one person everyone trusted to protect me. 4 days to save my life from someone who was supposed to love me. I poured myself a glass of wine and started planning my counterattack. Saturday morning, I was awakened by pounding on my front door at 6:47 a.m. Through the peephole, I saw 2 police officers standing on my porch, looking official and uncomfortable. "Mrs. Eleanor Hartwell? We need to speak with you about a wellness check request." My hands trembled as I unlocked the door. "What kind of wellness check?" The older officer, a woman with kind eyes and graying hair, consulted her notepad. "We received a call from your niece, Sarah Crawford, at 11:30 last night. She reported that you left her several threatening voicemails and that she's concerned for your mental state and her own safety." I didn't call her. I was asleep by 10 p.m. "Ma'am, we're required to follow up on all reports involving potential elder self-neglect or threats against family members." The younger officer stepped forward. "May we come in and just verify that you're okay? Your niece mentioned you might be experiencing some confusion." There it was, Sarah's narrative following me everywhere, even into official police reports. I led them into my living room, grateful that my house was spotless and I was fully dressed and coherent. The female officer, Sergeant Martinez according to her name tag, glanced around my tidy home. "Mrs. Hartwell, have you been having any memory issues lately? Any confusion about dates, people, or recent events?" "No confusion at all. In fact, I can tell you exactly what's happening." I retrieved Janet's folder from my desk. "My niece is attempting to defraud me through a false guardianship proceeding. She's been impersonating me on phone calls and creating fake evidence of mental decline." Sergeant Martinez accepted the folder and flipped through several pages. Her expression grew increasingly serious as she read Janet's documentation. "These are pretty detailed allegations, Mrs. Hartwell. Do you have an attorney?" "Howard Brennan downtown. And a private investigator, Janet Rodriguez." I handed her both business cards. "The guardianship hearing is Monday morning. Everything Sarah has told you is part of a systematic fraud." The younger officer looked skeptical. "Ma'am, we did listen to the voicemail your niece played for us. It definitely sounded like someone your age, and the caller ID showed your home phone number. Officer, I can show you my phone records. I can provide medical documentation of my cognitive function. I can prove that every concerning behavior she's reported is fabricated." My voice grew stronger as I spoke. "Sarah sold her house to fund this scheme. She's hired multiple law firms. She's created false identities and impersonated me to dozens of people." Sergeant Martinez closed the folder and looked at me carefully. "Mrs. Hartwell, I've seen elder financial abuse cases before. What you're describing is sophisticated, but not impossible." She turned to her partner. "Jake, call dispatch and see if we've had any other reports about this address or these individuals." 20 minutes later, they'd verified through their computer system that I had no history of mental health calls, no previous wellness checks, and no complaints filed against me. Sarah, however, had called 911 3 times in the past month reporting her concern about my welfare. Each call followed the same pattern, Sergeant Martinez explained. Worried family member, elderly relative acting confused, requests for wellness checks that we couldn't complete because you weren't home or didn't answer the door. I was in Italy for 2 weeks. Before that, I was probably at the grocery store or library when you came by. That tracks with our call logs. She handed me her card. "Mrs. Hartwell, I'm noting in our system that you appear mentally competent and that there may be ongoing family fraud issues. If your niece calls again, we'll have this context." After they left, I called Janet immediately. "This is escalating beyond financial fraud," I told her. "She's using the police to build her case now. Every wellness check call creates an official record of her concern about my mental state. I'm not surprised. False guardianship cases often involve law enforcement at some point." Janet's voice was grim. "But Mrs. Hartwell, this also works in our favor. The police just documented that you're clearly competent and that Sarah has a pattern of making unfounded reports. What about the voicemail she played for them? I'm having it analyzed by an audio forensics expert. Results should be ready by Sunday afternoon. One more day until the hearing. One more day to prove that my own niece had orchestrated the most elaborate betrayal I'd ever experienced. Sunday afternoon brought the call from Janet's audio expert that I'd been both hoping for and dreading. Mrs. Hartwell, the voicemail analysis is complete, Dr. Rebecca Chen's voice was crisp and professional through the phone. The recording your niece provided has been digitally manipulated. What we're hearing is approximately 60% authentic speech samples, likely recorded from previous phone conversations with you, and 40% computer-generated voice synthesis. My legs gave out and I sank into my kitchen chair. She recorded our phone calls? That appears to be the case. The technology exists to splice together real speech patterns with AI-generated content to create completely fabricated conversations. It's sophisticated, but not perfect. There are micropauses and tonal inconsistencies that give it away under analysis. How long would something like this take to create? With the right software? A few hours. But collecting enough source material to make it convincing would require planning. I'd estimate she's been recording your conversations for months. After hanging up, I sat in my kitchen staring at my phone like it was a venomous snake. Every conversation with Sarah since August, maybe longer, had been secretly recorded. Every casual comment about my finances, my travel plans, my daily routine had been cataloged and filed away for future manipulation. The intimacy of the betrayal was breathtaking. She'd weaponized my voice against me. At 4:17 p.m., my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Emma standing on my porch alone, looking young and miserable in her high school hoodie. Aunt Ellie? Can I come in? I need to talk to you. My heart broke all over again looking at her red-rimmed eyes. Of course, sweetheart. Emma collapsed onto my couch and immediately burst into tears. I know what my mom is doing to you. I know about the lawyers and the guardianship thing and all of it. Emma, honey. She made me lie to people. The words tumbled out between sobs. She told me you were getting sick, that you needed help but were too proud to ask for it. She said the family was planning an intervention and that I needed to back up her story about you being confused. I handed her a box of tissues and waited. But you're not confused. You've never been confused. And yesterday I found papers in her room about your house, your bank accounts, everything. Emma looked up at me with her father's green eyes. Aunt Ellie, is she trying to steal from you? The question hung in the air between us. How do you tell a 16-year-old that her mother is capable of elaborate financial fraud? How do you destroy a child's faith in the one parent she has left? Emma, your mother is going through some difficult times financially. She sold our house. Emma's voice cracked. She told me it was temporary, that we'd buy something better once her business venture paid off. But there is no business venture, is there? It's just you. Your money, your house, everything you worked for. I moved to the couch and put my arms around her. She felt so small, so fragile. She's been coaching me on what to say if anyone asks about you, Emma whispered into my shoulder. About time she seemed forgetful or confused. But I can't do it anymore. I can't lie for her, especially not to hurt you. What do you want to do, sweetheart? Emma pulled back and looked at me with a determination that reminded me heartbreakingly of Sarah at that age. I want to tell the truth. At the hearing tomorrow, or to the police, or whoever needs to hear it. My mom needs help, but not the kind she's trying to get. Outside, October dusk was settling over Salem, and tomorrow morning I'd walk into that courtroom with everything on the line. But for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel completely alone. The phone rang at 5:23 a.m. Monday morning, jolting me from the first decent sleep I'd had in weeks. Janet's voice was tense and urgent. Mrs. Hartwell, we have a problem. Sarah filed an emergency motion at midnight last night claiming Emma is missing. She's telling the court that you've kidnapped her granddaughter and are holding her against her will as part of your paranoid delusions. I looked toward the guest bedroom where Emma had spent the night after our conversation. She called her mother at 8 p.m. to say she was staying with a friend, not wanting to lie outright but not ready to trigger Sarah's wrath either. The hearing has been moved up to 7:30 a.m., Janet continued. Sarah's claiming this is proof of your deteriorating mental state and that Emma is in immediate danger. She's not missing. She's sleeping in my guest room. I know, but Sarah has filed a police report. They could show up any minute with a warrant to search your house. Janet's voice grew more urgent. You need to wake Emma and have her call her mother immediately. We can't give Sarah any legitimate ammunition. I knocked gently on Emma's door. She emerged looking frightened and exhausted, clutching her phone which showed 17 missed calls from her mother. I have to go home, don't I? She asked quietly. I think that's best, sweetheart. But Emma, everything you told me yesterday, do you still feel the same way? She nodded, her jaw set with teenage determination. I meant every word. But Aunt Ellie, I'm scared of what she'll do when she finds out I know the truth. At 6:15 a.m., I drove Emma to the Riverside Gardens apartment complex, both of us silent during the 10-minute drive. Sarah was waiting in the parking lot in her robe and slippers, her face a mask of perfectly calculated maternal panic. Emma. Oh my God, I was so worried. Sarah rushed toward the car, but I noticed her eyes weren't on her daughter, they were on me, cold and calculating. Aunt Ellie, I can't believe you would take her without telling me. I've been sick with worry all night. I stayed with Aunt Ellie because I wanted to, Emma said firmly as she got out of the car. She didn't kidnap me, Mom. Stop being ridiculous. Sarah's face flickered with something ugly before she rearranged it back into concerned mother mode. Honey, you don't understand what's happening here. Aunt Ellie isn't well. She's been saying terrible things about me, making up stories. What stories, Mom? Emma's voice was steady, but I could see her hands trembling. Stories about lawyers and guardianship petitions and selling our house to pay for them? The color drained from Sarah's face. For just a moment, her mask slipped completely, and I saw the trapped, desperate woman underneath all the manipulation. Emma, go inside. Now. Sarah's voice had lost all pretense of warmth. We'll discuss this later. Actually, Emma said, pulling out her phone, I think we should discuss it now. Especially the part where you've been recording Aunt Ellie's phone calls and making fake voicemails. Sarah lunged for the phone, but Emma was quicker. I found the recordings on your laptop, Mom. Hours of them. And the voice software you bought. Did you really think I wouldn't figure it out? You were snooping through my private files? Sarah's voice rose to a near shriek. How dare you? How dare I discover that my mother is committing fraud against the one person in this family who actually loves us? Emma's composure finally cracked. Do you know what Aunt Ellie was planning to give you before you decided to steal everything instead? $20,000, Mom. She was going to just give it to us. Sarah's eyes snapped to mine, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I saw genuine shock there. She was going to help us, Emma continued, tears streaming down her face. And instead of asking, you decided to destroy her. You turned the whole family against her. You made me lie for you. I checked my watch, 6:47 a.m. 43 minutes until the hearing that would determine whether Sarah succeeded in stealing my life. But looking at my niece's face as her own daughter exposed her lies, I realized she'd already lost the only thing that really mattered. At 7:30 a.m. sharp, I walked into courtroom 4B with Janet at my side, Howard trailing behind us with a briefcase full of counter-evidence. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in harsh, institutional white. Sarah sat at the plaintiff's table with her attorney, a sharp-faced woman in an expensive navy suit who looked like she'd stepped out of a corporate boardroom. Emma was nowhere to be seen. Where's your granddaughter, Mrs. Crawford? Judge Patricia Hendricks asked as she reviewed the emergency motion. You filed a missing person report claiming she was in danger. Sarah's attorney, Ms. Castellano, stood smoothly. Your Honor, the minor has been returned safely to her mother's custody. However, this incident demonstrates the defendant's increasingly erratic behavior and poor judgment regarding family relationships. I felt Howard tense beside me. We'd prepared for financial fraud accusations, not kidnapping charges. Your Honor, Howard said, rising, my client provided temporary shelter to her great niece at the teenager's own request. No laws were broken, and the young woman was free to leave at any time. Judge Hendricks, a woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and sharp eyes, looked unimpressed with both arguments. Let's focus on the primary petition. Ms. Castellano, you're requesting emergency guardianship based on claims of mental incapacitation. What evidence do you present? Your Honor, we have sworn affidavits from 3 family members documenting a pattern of confusion, paranoia, and erratic behavior. We also have recorded evidence of threatening phone calls made by the defendant to my client. My stomach clenched as Ms. Castellano played the fabricated voicemail. Even knowing it was fake, hearing my own voice, or something that sounded like my voice, making those ugly threats was deeply unsettling. Additionally, Ms. Castellano continued, Mrs. Hartwell has made wild accusations against my client, claiming elaborate conspiracy theories involving identity theft and financial fraud. These paranoid delusions represent a clear danger to herself and others. Howard stood immediately. Your Honor, I'd like to present counter-evidence regarding these allegations. For the next 20 minutes, Howard systematically dismantled Sarah's case. Dr. Martinez's cognitive assessment, proving my mental competency. Bank records showing Sarah's attempts to access my accounts illegally. Phone company logs proving the threatening voicemails came from a spoofed number, not my phone. Janet's investigation documenting the pattern of impersonation and fraud. But the most damaging evidence came from Dr. Rebecca Chen's audio analysis. Your Honor, Howard said, the recording presented by the petitioner is a digital fabrication. Audio forensics prove it was created using voice synthesis technology and samples recorded without Mrs. Hartwell's knowledge or consent. Judge Hendricks' expression grew increasingly stern as she reviewed the forensics report. Ms. Castellano, are you aware that submitting fabricated evidence to this court constitutes perjury and contempt? Sarah's attorney looked genuinely shocked. She whispered urgently with Sarah for several moments before standing. Your Honor, my client maintains that the recordings are authentic. We request a continuance to obtain our own audio analysis. Motion denied. Judge Hendricks' voice could have frozen Lake Superior. Ms. Castellano, I'm also troubled by these financial irregularities. Mr. Brennan, has your client filed criminal charges regarding the alleged fraud? We're prepared to do so immediately following these proceedings, Your Honor. Judge Hendricks turned her attention to Sarah directly. Ms. Crawford, these are serious allegations. Identity theft, wire fraud, perjury, filing false police reports. Do you have anything to say in your own defense? Sarah stood slowly, her face pale but her chin raised defiantly. Your Honor, my aunt is clearly mentally ill. She's created an elaborate fantasy to explain away her own confusion and memory loss. I acted out of love and concern for her well-being. By attempting to steal her assets? By trying to protect her assets from her own poor judgment. Sarah's voice grew stronger, more convinced. She gave away $1,200 to strangers in Italy. She's been making impulsive financial decisions. Someone needs to protect her from herself. I watched my niece lie with such conviction that for a moment, I almost believed she believed it herself. The $1,200 had been for that upgraded hotel room in Rome, a perfectly reasonable travel expense that she twisted into evidence of financial incompetence. Judge Hendricks shuffled through the papers one final time. Ms. Crawford, the evidence suggests you've engaged in systematic fraud against your aunt while simultaneously claiming to protect her. That's not love, that's exploitation. The gavel came down at 8:47 a.m., dismissing Sarah's petition and ordering a criminal investigation into her activities. But as I watched my niece's face crumble in defeat, I realized the real devastation was just beginning. The celebration was short-lived. As Howard packed up his briefcase and Janet shook my hand, I noticed Sarah speaking intently with her attorney near the courthouse exit. Their conversation looked urgent, desperate even, and Ms. Castellano kept glancing back at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Mrs. Hartwell, Janet said quietly, I think we should leave through the back entrance. Sarah looks like she's planning something. But it was too late. As we approached the main doors, Sarah broke away from her attorney and walked directly toward me. Her face was composed now, almost serene, which somehow felt more threatening than her earlier desperation. Aunt Ellie, she said, her voice carrying that old familiar warmth that had fooled me for so long. I need you to know that this isn't over. Howard stepped between us. Ms. Crawford, you should speak with your attorney before making any statements. Sarah ignored him completely, her eyes locked on mine. You think you've won something here, but you have no idea what you've cost me. What you've cost Emma. I didn't cost you anything, Sarah. You did this to yourself. Did I? Her smile was cold, calculated. Because I've been thinking about our family dynamic over the years. All those times you swooped in to help everyone, all that money you've thrown around. Did you ever wonder why everyone comes to you with their problems? I felt something twist in my stomach. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the $15,000 you lent Michael for his business expansion 3 years ago. The $10,000 you gave Rebecca when Tom lost his job. The college fund you set up for David's kids. Sarah's voice grew stronger with each revelation. You've been buying this family's loyalty for decades, and now you're shocked that someone finally saw it for what it is. Janet touched my elbow gently. Mrs. Hartwell, we should go. But I couldn't move. Because underneath Sarah's manipulation and lies, there was a grain of truth that cut deeper than I wanted to admit. Had I been purchasing love? Had my financial generosity created the very dynamics that allowed Sarah to exploit everyone's expectations? The beautiful part, Sarah continued, is that I don't need guardianship anymore. I've already accomplished what I set out to do. Which is what? Howard asked sharply. I've exposed Aunt Ellie for what she really is. A lonely old woman who uses money to control people. Sarah glanced around the courthouse lobby, where several other families were waiting for their hearings. By Thanksgiving, everyone will know about this court case. Everyone will know she accused me of fraud, that she hired investigators to spy on her own family. My blood ran cold. Sarah, don't. Don't what? Don't tell the truth? That you've turned our family gathering into some kind of revenge fantasy? Sarah's mask dropped completely now. You think you're going to humiliate me in front of everyone on Thursday, but I've already called Michael, Rebecca, David. They all know about your evidence folder and your private investigator and your plan to destroy me. The courthouse lobby seemed to tilt sideways. My carefully planned Thanksgiving revelation, the moment when I would present all the evidence and watch my family's faces change as they realized what Sarah had done, was already ruined. I told them how paranoid you become, Sarah continued relentlessly. How you've convinced yourself that everyone's out to get you. How you've weaponized your money against the people who love you most. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper only I could hear. The really beautiful part is that even though I lost today, you've lost something much more valuable. You've lost your family, Aunt Ellie. Because who's going to believe the crazy old woman who sees conspiracies everywhere? Walking out of that courthouse, I felt like I'd won the battle but might have already lost the war. Sarah's parting words echoed in my head as Janet drove me home. You've lost your family, Aunt Ellie. By the time we reached my house, I had 3 missed calls from Michael and 2 from Rebecca. I knew without listening to the voicemails what they would say. Mrs. Hartwell, Janet said as we sat in my driveway, Sarah's right about one thing. She's already started damage control with your family. But that doesn't mean she wins. Doesn't it? I stared at my house, the same house where I'd hosted 43 years of family holidays, where I'd bandaged scraped knees and celebrated graduations and listened to everyone's problems. If my own family believes I'm a paranoid old woman who hired investigators to spy on them, what's left? My phone rang. David's name flashed on the screen. Aunt Ellie? His voice was careful, distant. I just got off the phone with Sarah. She told me about the court hearing, about how you've been investigating the family. David, let me explain. She said you have some kind of evidence folder about all of us. Bank records, phone logs, surveillance reports. He paused, and I could hear the hurt in his voice. Is that true? Have you been spying on your own family? The question hit like a physical blow. I was protecting myself from fraud. But you were investigating all of us, right? Not just Sarah. She said you have financial records going back years, documentation of every loan, every gift, every time anyone asked you for help. My mouth went dry. Because Sarah was right, Janet's investigation had been thorough. In documenting Sarah's fraud, we'd inevitably compiled information about my financial relationships with everyone in the family. Every loan, every gift, every instance where I'd helped someone through a crisis. David, it wasn't like that. Mom's really upset, Aunt Ellie. She said you'd been keeping track of the $10,000 you gave us when Tom was out of work, like it was some kind of... I don't know, like you were building a case against us or something. After he hung up, I sat in my car staring at the manila folders on my passenger seat. Sarah had turned my defensive investigation into evidence of my own controlling nature. Every document I gathered to prove her fraud could also be seen as proof that I'd been monitoring and cataloging my family's financial dependence on me. The truly insidious part was that I couldn't deny the underlying truth. I had kept records. I did remember exactly how much I'd given everyone and when. And maybe, buried underneath my genuine desire to help, there had been a small part of me that felt powerful being the family's financial anchor. Janet was watching me through the rearview mirror. What are you thinking? I'm thinking Sarah just executed the perfect counterstrike. I gathered the folders against my chest. She's turned my evidence into a weapon against me. Now when I try to expose her fraud at Thanksgiving, it'll look like a bitter old woman attacking her family with files and spreadsheets. So what do? I looked at my house again, imagining Thursday's dinner. Michael and Linda arriving early to help with preparations, their faces careful and concerned. Rebecca bringing her famous stuffing while shooting worried glances at Emma. David and his family walking on eggshells around their allegedly paranoid great-aunt. And Sarah, sitting at my table, playing the victim of my unfounded accusations while my family wondered if I really was losing my mind. But as I sat there feeling sorry for myself, my phone buzzed with a text from Emma. Aunt Ellie, don't let her win. I'm still on your side. Some of us know the truth. Maybe I hadn't lost everything after all. Thursday morning, I woke up at 5:30 a.m. with absolute clarity about what needed to happen. Not revenge, not dramatic confrontations, but something Sarah hadn't anticipated, the simple truth, delivered with the precision I'd learned from 43 years of teaching teenagers who thought they could outsmart me. I spent 2 hours in my kitchen, not preparing turkey and stuffing, but writing. A single page, handwritten in my careful teacher's script, with dates, dollar amounts, and a timeline that even Sarah couldn't manipulate. At 11:47 a.m., my doorbell rang. Michael and Linda arrived first, carrying their traditional green bean casserole and forced smiles. Michael's hug felt tentative, uncertain. Ellie, we need to talk about what happened Monday, he said, setting down the casserole with particular care. Sarah told us about the court case, about the investigators. I know she did. She called you Tuesday night, didn't she? Probably crying, talking about how paranoid I'd become. I smiled calmly. Would you like to see my phone records showing I never made those threatening calls? Or the audio forensics proving she fabricated them? Linda's face went very still. What are you saying? I'm saying Sarah sold her house for $80,000 to pay lawyers to have me declared mentally incompetent so she could steal my estate. And she's been impersonating me for months to convince all of you that I'm losing my mind. Rebecca arrived 20 minutes later with Tom and her famous stuffing, followed by David's family. Each arrival brought the same careful expressions, the same gentle concern for their allegedly unstable aunt. Sarah and Emma came last, at exactly 1 p.m. Aunt Ellie. Sarah's performance was flawless, the devoted niece checking on her troubled relative. How are you feeling today? I was so worried after Monday's difficulties. Emma shot her mother a look of pure disgust and hugged me tightly. I'm proud of you, Aunt Ellie, she whispered. We gathered around my dining room table as we had every Thanksgiving for 2 decades. The turkey was golden, the conversation was strained, and everyone kept glancing at me like I might start ranting about conspiracies at any moment. During dessert, I stood up and pulled out my handwritten page. Before we finish today, I want to share something with all of you. My voice was calm, professional, the same tone I'd used to address school board meetings. On September 15th, Sarah Crawford purchased a prepaid phone to impersonate me. On September 18th, she began calling family members pretending to be confused and paranoid. On September 22nd, she filed fraudulent guardianship papers claiming I was missing and mentally incapacitated. Sarah's fork clattered against her plate. Aunt Ellie, please don't. On October 12th, she hired Henderson, Walsh and Associates for $25,000 to steal my house and bank accounts. On October 20th, she created fake audio recordings of me making threats. I looked directly at Michael. She recorded our phone conversations for months, then used voice synthesis software to manufacture evidence that I was dangerous. The silence was deafening. Emma found the recordings on Sarah's laptop. The police have verified that the threatening calls came from a spoof number, not my phone. Judge Patricia Hendricks dismissed Sarah's petition Monday morning and ordered a criminal investigation. Sarah stood abruptly. This is exactly what I was talking about. She's obsessed, she's... Mom, stop. Emma's voice cut across the table like a blade. Just stop lying. I heard the real recordings. I saw the voice software. I know what you did. Rebecca's face had gone completely white. Sarah, is this true? She needed money for credit cards and Emma's college fund, I continued quietly. If she'd asked, I would have given her $20,000. The check is still in my desk drawer, made out in her name. But instead, she chose to try to steal everything. Sarah's composure finally cracked completely. You don't understand. You've all been dancing to her tune for years, coming to her with your problems, taking her money. She keeps track of everything, every loan, every gift, every time anyone needed help. She's been controlling this family with her checkbook for decades. The accusation hung in the air. And for a moment, I wondered if she was right. Then Michael spoke quietly. Sarah, even if that were true, it doesn't justify fraud. David nodded slowly. Aunt Ellie helped us when we needed it. She never held it over our heads or demanded anything in return. She gave freely, Rebecca added, her voice shaking. You tried to take by force. Sarah looked around the table at faces that had turned from sympathy to disgust, from concern to condemnation. Her last desperate gambit, turning my generosity into manipulation, had failed because everyone knew the difference between giving and stealing. Emma, we're leaving. Sarah grabbed her purse with shaking hands. No, Mom. I'm staying with Aunt Ellie tonight. Emma's voice was steady, final. I'll come home tomorrow, but I'm not leaving with you right now. After Sarah stormed out, we sat in stunned silence for several minutes. Then Linda started clearing plates, Michael began wrapping leftover turkey, and gradually, naturally, my family began taking care of me the way I'd always taken care of them. Not because I bought their loyalty, but because that's what families do. Later that evening, as Emma helped me load the dishwasher, my phone rang. Janet Rodriguez, calling with an update I'd been expecting. Mrs. Hartwell, Sarah Crawford was arrested an hour ago. Wire fraud, identity theft, filing false police reports, and perjury. The district attorney is recommending she serve 18 months. I looked at Emma, who was drying my good china with careful teenage hands. What about Emma? She'll stay with family during the proceedings. I believe there's an aunt who's particularly well qualified for guardianship. 2 months later, Emma moved into my guest room officially. Sarah pled guilty to avoid trial and received 14 months in minimum security, plus restitution of $47,000, every penny she'd spent on lawyers and fraudulent schemes. The family still gathers at my house for holidays. We don't talk about Sarah's betrayal anymore, but something changed that Thanksgiving day. My nieces and nephews call more often just to chat, not because they need anything. When they do need help, they ask directly instead of hinting. And I give freely, without keeping careful records. Because I finally understand the difference between generosity and control, between love and leverage. Sarah tried to steal my life, but instead, she gave me something unexpected, the freedom to love my family without keeping score.